a lot of people or a lot of bloggers, a lot of Active Rain bloggers or real estate bloggers will go out there, they'll write something, and then they'll sit back and they'll go, man, I hope somebody finds this thing in the search engine. I hope this brings me a new client. But there's some things we can do with a piece of content that we might have, or even potentially with a piece of content that's not ours, that we can do that can help us solidify ourselves as experts in the minds of the people that we're connected to. So today we're going to talk about how to share real estate news online. So why spend the next 60 minutes with me? There's a couple of reasons, okay? You would like to become a trusted advisor for the people in your circles. You'd like to share engaging content with those people, right? You might potentially be looking to get some people off the fence, and you'd like to be able to use real estate news to your advantage to find new prospects. So with those things kind of in mind, let's talk about how do you find stories or data worth sharing. And so in our, in the SEO class and in the keyword phrase class, we're really talking about like content that you're creating, and a lot of what we're talking about is really related to kind of homes for sale or condos for sale or something specific to your business. You might be a lender, so it might be FHA, FHA loans in King County or something. But there's a whole other set of stuff out there that's worth putting in front of people to kind of solidify us as an expert. So here's a couple of the ways that, like, if I was a real estate agent and every day I was challenged with thinking about how can I either create a blog post or have some kind of content that's worth sharing socially so that people look at me as an expert, they start to identify me as that person in their circle who's the real estate guy or gal. Here's a couple of places that I would immediately look towards, and these aren't, I don't know that I'm telling you anything here that if you thought about it, you wouldn't realize. The first one would be Google Alerts, okay? And I'll give you a couple examples of how I might go about setting up Google Alerts for my business if I was looking to kind of keep on top of what's going on. The local news outlets, I mean, I read the Seattle Times every day. If I'm a real estate agent in Omaha, like, I want to be reading my local newspaper every day. There's going to be some good real estate types of stories from time to time, and I really want to kind of keep an eye out for those things. The way that people start to get their news nowadays, it's changing, right? It's been changing, and not everybody is heading to the Seattle Times first thing. Most folks, in fact, are heading to Facebook first, or they're heading, to Twitter if they're a Twitter person, or they're heading to some of these different places that they get news. But I want to make sure that I know where the real news is, right, and potentially be able to share that. National, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, these things. These are places we can go to kind of find out what's going on. Real estate news sites, right, the sites like the Inmans or the Agent Genius or AG Beat, I like them for some good real estate news. Other bloggers is a great place to kind of find things that you might have missed. And so, the network, Active Rain, you're able to get in there and kind of see what other people are talking about. And maybe there's some stuff that your fellow bloggers are writing about and sharing that's worth you sharing as well. And then your own research. And what I mean by that is you guys have access as, members of your MLS and these sorts of things to data and information that the general consumers out there aren't as easily able to access. So here's some places that you can kind of look in terms of Google Alerts. Like, if I was a real estate agent in Seattle, I'm going to go out and set up, a series of Google Alerts that really keeps me up to date on what's going on in my marketplace. And these are just some examples that I kind of pulled. You guys could probably think of some more examples of things, but I would go out and have these Google Alerts set up, and I would probably have them set up to be alerting me like once a day, right? You can do these things like breaking as they happen, but that ends up, having you have 50 Google Alert emails every day, and you don't want that. So you can set Google Alerts up to have them come in daily. I believe you can even have them come in weekly, but you'll probably want to have it daily. And then it's just one email that you check. You can kind of get a good sense out there for what other bloggers are writing about, right? Because Google's going to pick that stuff up for what your local newspapers are writing about. I mean, this could really be a place that kind of clears everything that's going on out there and gives you a good idea of what are the potential things that I could be sharing or talking about in my blog? So once you've found a piece of news or some data that maybe your MLS provided, or some data that the National Association of Realtors put out, what you're going to do is you're going to decide, like, do I want to reinforce this data? Do I want to say, the National Association of Realtors came out with home sales numbers today, and man, things look great. But in our neck of the woods, things look really great, right? So we're reinforcing that data. Or we can disagree with it. The NAR came out with this data that home sales are up 12% this year, but not in Phoenix or not in Omaha or not in Seattle, right? We can choose to disagree with this data if we want. And then there becomes kind of this fundamental starting point, our blog, right? And that's what we're here talking about. We're at Active Rain University. We're talking about, or it's a blogging boot camp. It would make sense that the fundamental starting point for sharing real estate news is going to be our blog. And so I'll give you a couple examples. There's a lot of ways that you could go with this, but Deb used the Active Rain infographic, Real Estate is Back. And so we polled all of our Active Rain members, and we talked, and people let us know what was going on in their local markets. And we kind of take this national approach, and we all know that national real estate news doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot to somebody sitting in the house in Clark County where Deb does business, right? So what she did is she took that local news, and we had it as an infographic, right? So it was a fun picture that you can share. But she took that thing and she made it applicable to the people that live in her market, because it doesn't mean anything to somebody living in Clark County, Washington, that the 10 top markets are experiencing, 8% appreciation. Like, that doesn't mean anything to somebody in Clark County. But Deb can take this news and say, look, nationally things are look like they're on the rebound, but here's what it means for you in Clark County, right? This is a good piece of content here for her to be able to share, because she's reinforcing something that's happening at a national level. Rich, here's a great example of some stuff that Rich did, where the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors had released home sale numbers, right? He used those numbers and just reinforced them. I don't even know that he put a spin on it here necessarily. He basically is just reporting the numbers from the Albuquerque Association of Realtors, but he's doing it on his blog, right? That becomes the piece of news now that he can share. He's not just sharing a link to the to the press release that the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors did. Rich is making this a piece of content of his own that's worth sharing. You guys come across this kind of thing all the time, right? NAR, your state realtor association. If you have a good, strong local area realtor association like Rich does here, it's not hard to find this content if you're out there looking for it. So once you have the blog post, and this isn't necessarily about the blog post itself, right? This is about what we do once we found a piece of news and we're able to do something with it, and doing something with it, with the news, really makes it our own. Okay, and it's cool to be able to go out there and share a link on Facebook or something like that. It's better for your business to be able to do that with a piece of content that's uniquely yours, right? And so Rich's is a great example. He could have very easily, and maybe even it's the easier thing to do would have been to just go out and share a link to the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors report. Okay, he didn't do that. He took that extra bit of time to make that information his own, so that now when he's sharing it, people are looking towards him as the expert. So what do we do with this blog post once we have it? So remember, right, we want to become that trusted advisor. Now, are we more of a trusted advisor if we produce the information for them, put it in our blog, right? We want to share engaging content with our followers. We want to get consumers off the fence. And we want to use the real estate news to our advantage. So we've got our blog post here. And it's out there, right? And again, this is where most people stop, right? Rich would write the blog post about the the home sales numbers from the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors, and then most of us would just go, man, I hope people find this. Like, I can't wait to see how many clicks this thing gets, or, you know, I just know somebody's going to pick the phone up and call me because they were on Google and they found my blog post. Oh, that's part of it, right? But that's not what we're here to talk about today, and there's some extra things that we could be doing. So the first one, how many of you guys, and I guess don't maybe just think this to yourself, but how many of you are doing a newsletter? Okay, I would imagine a bunch of you, and your blog or your ability to share news that's happening in your market, great fodder for your newsletter, right? Like, we'd like to think that everybody we send our newsletter out to follows our blog. The reality is they don't, okay? They're more apt to be just looking in their email probably than they are to be getting like an RSS feed of our blog. I would imagine most of the people on your newsletter list don't even know what an RSS feed is still today, right? Or if they do, they don't have one, right? I mean, the fact that Google shut down Google Reader as an RSS feed reader, like, that tells me that we need to have other ways to get our blog content in front of people that we're connected to. So sending out our newsletter, I mean, this would absolutely be something where after Rich wrote the post about, you know, home sales numbers from the Greater Association or Albuquerque Association of Realtors, like, he wants to get that in front of the people that he's connected to, right? It just reinforces to them that he's an expert for them. It might reinforce to them that they want to get off the fence, right? But these are people that he's already connected to. One of the things about sharing your content in this fashion, I think, or thinking about your content from the perspective of how can I use it above somebody just finding it in Google, is your content has just as good of a chance to reinforce the relationships that you already have as it does to find you new relationships. The new relationships are generally going to come from that search engine, right? Somebody finding you on Google that didn't know you before. These ways that we're talking about today are ways that we can reinforce the relationships with the people that we already have, right? Because they're probably not going to find, you know, they're not going to be looking for our content. They might, but there's not a very high likelihood that they're going to be on Google, right? Not as high of a likelihood as it would be that they would open their inbox or they would see us on Facebook. We'll talk about that in a minute. We might consider reaching out with content we've created directly to hot prospects or even to cold ones. Okay, so if I have, you know, a good CRM, a good lead management piece, I'm going to have a pretty good idea inside of that CRM who are my hot prospects or who are my cold prospects, right? I mean, a cold prospect for me is somebody maybe that registered on my website, but they've never responded to anything that I've put out there. So taking a piece of news that might directly apply to some group, right? If I've got people that are looking in, you know, they've come to my website, they've been looking at homes in Seattle, and I'm able to identify all these cold prospects that have been looking at homes in Seattle but have never responded to me. Like, they might be somebody who would be a good recipient for news about the Seattle real estate market, right? And especially for my spin or my reinforcement or my disagreement with that news, right? That's going to kind of affirm to them that I'm that trusted advisor. I'm that person that they should be listening to as it relates to real estate. If you have hot prospects in your business, right, this is where you can potentially move somebody off the fence. Like, if you have people that are coming back to your website all the time and they're looking at the houses, they've been doing it for 6 months, and you can see lately they've really started to pick up, and it's like it used to be, you know, once a week they'd be on your site looking, and now it's like every 2 days they're on your site looking. All right, we don't know this unless we have a really strong CRM for our business that interacts with our website. But if we can see somebody that's been back on our website a bunch of times recently, right, and the King County Association of Realtors just put out numbers that show that, you know, the prices are moving in the upward direction, like, that's information that I want to share with a hot prospect. That's somebody that I want to let know, look, if you wait another 6 months like you've waited already since you started looking on my website, like, you're potentially going to be paying even more for the houses that you like, right? So reaching out directly, like, that would be something where I would create the blog post, and then I would just target that one hot prospect, right? Because, again, the chances that person's going to find my blog, or they're not very high, right? People find our blog because there's millions of people out there potentially searching for information, but that one hot prospect that we have, that's somebody we need to go out and spend special attention with. You can write your own press release, and I think this is a good idea if you do it the right way. If you've ever thought about writing your own press release, there is some really awesome information on ActiveRain about how to do this. So you can go and search for writing a press release on ActiveRain, and there's been some blog posts written by some members on ActiveRain that really break down for you how to write your own press release. But this is a great way to get information. So if the Greater Albuquerque Association of Realtors, did some numbers, and Rich does a take on those numbers, there's no reason why Rich shouldn't get his take on those numbers. This could be really a popular thing to do if you're looking at like national real estate news. So if you're taking some numbers that the National Association of Realtors put out, or you're taking a story that was written in the New York Times, and as a part of your blog post, you're applying that, like the one Deb did, for instance, you're applying that to your local market, that press release becomes a little bit more noteworthy, I guess, right? Because you're taking national news and you're applying it to your local market. That's something that your local media might be interested in, okay? And so I would say if you have good real estate news, if you've taken like a national story and put your own spin on it, you should absolutely consider reaching out to local media. And one of the things that I would maybe caution you about is reporters get hit up, I would imagine, quite a bit for stories. Okay, so you might want to consider like what's the best way to go about doing this. But look, you can find these people, right? You can, if I'm on the Seattle Times and I read a real estate related news article, like at the bottom of that article there's probably a pretty good chance that the author's Twitter address is on there or something like that, right? Or their email address sometimes even. So don't be scared to take a piece of content that you've written, especially if you've taken, again, a national news story and you've applied it to that local market, and reach out and contact local media. These folks are always looking for stories, right? And then we can share it on social media. So a big portion of this is how do we share these things on social media. And so Facebook's going to be, for most of us, we're probably most familiar with Facebook and kind of how it works. The first thing that I would like to suggest that you do on Facebook, and I actually want to ask this question of everybody right now and kind of get a sense for how many of you guys have done this. How many of you have lists on Facebook? Check in for me real quick and just let me get a sense for how many of you guys have used the list feature of Facebook. I got a couple. No. Yeah, so some folks have lists. Yes, lists. I don't even know what lists are. I have lists. Okay, so it looks like, well, no, now as we get down here more, no. Okay, so here's why lists are important, and then I'm going to show you what you can do and how you can create these things. Well, I guess let's go in and create them. So once we create them, we want to use them. So I'm on my Facebook here, and it's always fun to jump into your own Facebook, right? Like this is my Facebook, and show a large audience, because I never know what my friends on Facebook might have just posted like right this second, right? So if you get offended by something you see in my stream, I apologize, but there's really no other way to do this. The area I want to be looking for is this area on the left-hand side right here, and particularly this area that says friends. And when I click on here and I go into more, there's going to be a bunch of stuff already in this section. And if you have never created a list, there's still a pretty good chance that Facebook may have created a couple of these things for you. Okay, so like for instance, I have myself as having gone to Kent Ridge Senior High. Well, there's a list in here of other people that have identified with going to Kent Ridge Senior High as well. there's some geographic lists, and these ones are in here that they look just a little bit different, but we can see there's 3 geographic lists in my account already. I did not create these. Facebook went out and looked at my lists or my friends, and they decided where I have like concentrations of friends. And so they've said, and I went to school, high school in the Bellingham area in Blaine, and so I just have a bunch of friends in that area. And so what Facebook has determined is that I might want to share information with just people in a certain geographic area. So let's look at a list like, before we go in and I show you how you could create like a list of your past clients, or how you could create a list of, you know, your friends and family or something like that. Let's look at a geographic list real quick. And as I come into the Bellingham list, what this is going to give me is this is going to give me people that live within some radius of Bellingham. And these lists, you can actually manage them up here. And so when I click on manage, I can change the radius on this list. This is kind of a big deal because right now, or as a default, when this list was originally set up, the radius was set at 10 miles. And so when you go in and look, you are going to have, I would imagine, some geographical lists already set up by Facebook. And they're going to be set to a radius of 10 miles. And so for me, that would not have covered like where I grew up, Blaine, and where a lot of my friends are. And so if I was doing business as an agent in Bellingham, right, I'd want to cover most of Whatcom County where I did business. And so I would just change my radius, you know, out to be a little bit larger. So I might go to like, let's say 30 miles, right? That's going to give me kind of everything in here where I do business. And then I can save that. Now I have a list that I can choose to share with only those people. All right. Now if I wanted to create my own list, maybe I wanted to create a list of past clients. Okay, so there'd be certain things that I wouldn't necessarily share with all of my friends, but I might share those things with my past clients, right? Right here at the top, and so I just got here again by being at the friends area, clicking more, and then going here to create list. So my list name is going to be past, you know, clients in Whatcom County or something. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky, and especially if you're, look, I mean, the first time I ever made a list, I had like 1,200 people as friends on my Facebook. It was very challenging this first time, but hopefully I can convince you this is a good idea to spend some time on. And I'll tell you why that is here in a minute. But all I do now is I would just come in here, and I could just start adding folks, right? I mean, just by typing in their name, I could get in here and start adding people. Now, as I add additional friends, right, as I come in here and I'm saying, you know, I get a new friend request, I can determine where I want to put that person, right? So I confirm him as a friend, and then over here I can come in here and say, look, I want to put him on one of my lists, right? I'm going to make him RE.net folks. So Bill now is a friend of mine, but he's on a particular list. Then I can have people on more than one list. So Bill might have been somebody that's in the Seattle area. I could add him to that list. Lists, they could literally be a game changer for the kind of interaction that you get on Facebook. But we have to use them, right? So the next little slide, okay, now we got to use these lists. So every time I post something on Facebook, I can determine, and let's come back here to my home area, right? I can determine who I want to share that with. So I come down here and I say, look, today I'm posting something about, you know, the real estate market in Bellingham. Okay, so I read this national news story. It was about how home prices are up across the country, but my clients in Bellingham, they don't give a rip about that, right? They care about what's going on in Bellingham real estate. So I've taken the piece of news, I've written a blog post about it where I've shared, you know, maybe some stats from the local realtor association there, and it really give them a sense of, look, nationally, you know, the National Association of Realtors says this is going on, but here's what's happening in Bellingham. So I'm going to share that just with the folks in Bellingham, right? And now when I post this, it's going to go out to that list and basically everybody that's on my Facebook in a 30-mile radius of Bellingham. The reason that this is so important is because of this little formula that Facebook uses for us. And most of you guys today, as you jumped in here, probably didn't imagine we'd be looking at like a ridiculous, I don't know, what is trigonometry? I don't know, calculus. I don't know what this is. But this is representative of Facebook's EdgeRank. And Facebook's EdgeRank will determine how likely it is that your piece of content is going to show up in somebody else's news feed. Okay, and the news feed is just what we see when we first land on Facebook. And basically what EdgeRank says is your EdgeRank, or how likely we are to show your content, is based on a few things. One being the affinity, which means like how connected are you to the person that we're considering showing this piece of content to. Another one is the weight. So like simple text updates will weight higher than like an image update, or will weight higher than a link update. And then there's also this idea of decay, right? The longer something's out there, the less likely it is to show to somebody. Here's why affinity is a big deal. Or here's why EdgeRank is a big deal. Here's why lists are really important as it relates to that. Okay? Think about sharing a piece of real estate news. Let's say I have 1,000 friends, okay, but only 200 of them are in Bellingham. And I'm going to go out and share a piece of content, right? It's about the Bellingham real estate market. Now, if I chose to share that to all 1,000 of my friends, okay, where 800 of them could give a rip about the thing that I just shared, what I do with that piece of content is I basically alienate those 800 people. First of all, they didn't want to see it in their stream. Okay, and then when they did see it in their stream, they just ignored it. And by them ignoring that piece of content, my affinity with them has gone down, right? You probably have Facebook friends where you've never liked a photo, you've never commented on anything they've made, you've never liked a status update. And what happens is Facebook starts to say, look, these people, they don't really have a connection, so it's less likely that they're going to show your content in that person's news feed. But if the content that you're sharing is always something that they would be interested in, even if they only like it like one every 3 posts, right? That affinity starts to get larger between you and that other person, which leads to when you share something, it's more likely that they're going to see it. So this is a really important concept to understand, because if you're just sharing stuff kind of willy-nilly, and there's people that are being forced to not interact with that content because it's not related to them, or it doesn't mean anything to them, what you're doing is you're pushing them further and further away. Your affinity with them is becoming less and less every time you share something that's not relevant to them. Okay, so lists on Facebook are a really big way to make sure that the content that you're sharing with somebody is relevant to them, but it's more important because of this EdgeRank factor. Right? Does that make sense? And I'm sure there'll be a question or two about that, but hopefully I explain that in a way that makes sense. Just the more likely it is that the content we're sharing with somebody is relevant to them, right? The more likely it is that we'll be able to bring them content in the future. So going out and like sharing stuff on Facebook just on your own page and doing it in a list, that's a great way to share. But maybe there's existing communities on Facebook that may find value in the content that you're providing. So there's all kinds of these kinds of pages on Facebook, right? And these things, so this is like an example of a Whatcom County fan page, right, or a business page or a page. These things are out there for a lot of geographies, right? I would almost guess that in your like county, there's a page like this. I would guess that in your city, there's probably multiple pages like this. In fact, even at like a very hyper-local level, like a subdivision, there are pages on Facebook like this. In fact, you may have even created pages like this, right? For a subdivision that you farm, you've created a page and you've tried to invite some of the neighbors in and they share things on that page. Right? The page doesn't have to be yours. If you're somebody that's actively involved in that page, why wouldn't you share content on that page that's appropriate, right? It would absolutely be appropriate if I had written a piece about the Bellingham real estate market and given some context to what the national pundits are saying as it relates to Bellingham, it would make sense to share it on the Whatcom County fan page. Right? This is where you can start on Facebook, at least, to reach out to people that aren't necessarily in your sphere, right? Because when we're talking about lists and we're talking about sharing in that fashion, those people are in our sphere, right? In those cases, we're reinforcing, right? We're maybe trying to get people off the fence. We're not necessarily reaching out to new folks. This would be a way that we would reach out to new folks. I hear Carrie in here. What do you got for me, Carrie?
Yeah, Blair came up with a good question. Should we use multiple lists to attract people into the conversation?
Yeah. You know, if you've got, you can definitely share with multiple lists. So if you, here's the thing though, right? You say to attract people into the conversation. It's always kind of a balance, right? Because if I just, you know, if I think like, all right, like I wrote something about Bellingham, maybe I also want to share this with like other real estate professionals, right? Because I want those other real estate professionals to maybe jump on there and like reinforce what I'm saying. Man, you really broke these numbers down well, right? Which might bode well for me. But what happens is if, you know, if 99% of those other real estate professionals ignored this, now my affinity becomes less with them. And then when I share something where I'm looking for like feedback on my business and I'm hoping to get that in front of the real estate professional list that I've created, right, my real estate buddies, they might be less likely to see it because I've shared other things that didn't necessarily, right, that they didn't engage with. So yeah, I mean, it's not going to hurt, but again, I would say, you know, really think about who's in those lists and is the stuff that I'm sharing. Like I can't, you guys, I'm sure everybody on here has seen this sort of thing where somebody will post something and you totally just pass it by because it has no bearing on you.
Not only do we pass it by, but then I'm tempted to hide them from my feed. I'm tired of, you know, their market information. So
yeah, if all you use Facebook for is like real estate stuff, for instance, yeah, absolutely. Carrie's right. Like people will hide you. I've hidden probably more people than I care to admit, but I do it because the stuff they're sharing has no relevance to me at all. And the kind of crappy thing is you don't even know when you're being hidden. You know, you don't know when somebody takes that action and decides, look, I'm done listening to this guy's real estate drivel. Okay, so LinkedIn, right, this would be another place where you would definitely want to share your content. One of the things about LinkedIn is, at least for me, the content that I'm sharing there, I'm making that stuff public. Like anybody can come in and see my LinkedIn stuff. I mean, this is a place where, you know, it's a little bit more expected that the stuff you're sharing is going to be related to who you are professionally. And, you know, as it relates to Facebook, I really think that it's okay for you as a real estate agent to share stuff on your personal profile that relates to your business. And the reason I think that's okay is because, like, that's who you are, right? Like, I don't ever get turned off if a friend of mine shares something about their work. If all they do is share about their work, I get turned off on Facebook. But on LinkedIn, it's not uncommon that I would see, you know, my accountant like always sharing accounting type of stuff, right? It's not uncommon that I see, you know, my investment guy like always sharing stuff that I find interesting, and it's always related to his field, right? So LinkedIn is one where we, you know, definitely like be sharing your content on LinkedIn. Okay, it's not crazy to think that a professional would go to LinkedIn to see who in their network might know a real estate agent or be a real estate agent. Okay, and I think the people that would read on LinkedIn are a little bit more accepting of like kind of this hard real estate news, right? The data, the market reports, those sorts of things. Okay, Google Plus for me is like an absolute must for you guys, and the reason here's an example from Anita Clark, and she's an agent on Active Rain, and the reason I pulled this particular example is because of the comment she made at the bottom. And so Bill kind of said, hey, great job sharing this stuff about Warner Robins. And she came in here and said, hey, this is paying off nicely. I'm working on my second client as a result of Google+. When you're Google Plus does a couple of things. First, your content's kind of out there publicly, okay? There's the ability for things that you share inside of Google Plus to get ranked in Google search results. And there's even more of an ability for them to get ranked for people that you've connected to on Google Plus, or it's starting to even look like maybe people that you're connected to like through your Gmail. Right, so Google's doing some things with Google Plus to try to really get people here. And even though there's not a ton of people reading here, as you think about Google Plus and the fact that the things you share there have the potential to leak into actual Google search results, Google Plus becomes a place that you have to be sharing your content there. Right, and you'll notice how she does it here in terms of like what she writes, right? And she's got the link back to her blog post about the market report in this area, but she's also got some good keywords, and she even uses some hashtags on her stuff to make sure that as people are searching, right, so if they go into Google Plus and they're searching, or even if they're searching on Google itself, right, this stuff has the ability to be brought forward, right, to be put in front of people. And again, this is probably of all of them the one where you have the chance to connect with people that don't know you. And as she says here, right, she started this, and it's already, what was her second client? I don't know. It wasn't that long, I would imagine. But for her, it's not, it takes, a minute or three to get over there after she's done writing and to share that stuff on Google+. Big deal, Google+. Here's the deal with Twitter, you guys. I think if you don't use Twitter or know Twitter, like, I wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to try to figure it out just to be sharing things, right? Twitter is a whole different beast. It's about communicating with people. It's about engaging. It's about listening a lot of times, right? I mean, Twitter would be a good place to maybe find real estate information. But if you're not using Twitter effectively, like in this class, I don't know that I want to give you here's a couple of tips, because you shouldn't be on Twitter unless you're willing to like fully commit to it, or at least you shouldn't be using it as an avenue to market your business, because all you're doing is just kind of sending garbage out there and nobody's listening. I would say focus on something, and for most of us, like Facebook could be, because like we like to use it anyways, right? Like I like to use Twitter, but if you don't, like there's no reason you should just say, well, God, I'm going to start using Twitter because I think that like I need to have it as a part of my marketing bag. Right? Focus on something you like to use, because it's going to be a higher likelihood that you really dive in and you try to figure it out and you try to be more effective at it. Right? So like if you like to use Facebook, like dive in and figure out lists. Right? Dive in and look and see what kind of geographic lists does Facebook have set up for me already, and how can I maybe expand those out to get a little bit better coverage on the people that I would want to do business with. But if you're not using something, like don't feel like you have to get in there and be on Twitter because everybody's on Twitter. So what's next? Well, find a piece of news and write about it. And again, it doesn't have to be like a big piece of national news, right? It can be something where your local association of realtors put something out. It could be news that you create. And so like I don't have any, like on her particular, her market report right here, like this is news. It's only news to the people in Warner Robins. But it was news that Anita created. Right? She went into the MLS. She's the one that runs the numbers every month. She's the one that's creating this news. So it doesn't have to be something where you go out and find something someone else has done and piggyback on that. It could be something that you create yourself. Right? And when you think about news, like these same concepts, right, the idea of sharing these things, it could be frequently asked questions, right? It could be a question that one of your clients asked you in an email and you write a blog post about it. That becomes like, again, I don't know that it's news, but it's a piece that's worth sharing, right? But it's probably not a piece worth sharing with every single friend of mine, right? It might just be a piece worth sharing with the people local to where I do business. Right? Maybe I moved from somewhere, right? And I've got friends in this other place, or maybe like I'm in Arizona, and I want to share, something about, man, thinking about retiring to Arizona. That might be something I shared with everybody not on my Phoenix list, right? All the people outside of Arizona. So there's ways that you can think about this stuff and really get more efficient at how you share. Because the reality, just like Carrie said, there's really something to be said for if you're just sharing garbage just to share it. Now, in Google Plus, that might be okay, right? Because there's other reasons why we do it, to help, our search engine rankings, or to make sure that the people we're connected to on Google Plus see us when they do real Google searches. But on Facebook, it becomes a thing where we're subtly trying to get this content in there to people where it makes sense. So find a piece of news and write about it, right? Make sure your lead capture is in place. So one of the reasons why I think it's so important that you take, because you could just share that New York Times story, right? And I see people do this all the time. Let me give you a couple little tips here on sharing on Facebook, especially when we're talking about sharing a link. So let's say that I was going to share something from my blog, right? So I'd written a piece about something. I'm going to come down here and grab that piece that I've written, and I want to go about sharing this on my Facebook page. So free cool products from Real Estate Connect. All right. Again, here's something where I'm going to share this piece of content, but this isn't relevant to all of the people that I'm connected to on Facebook. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is paste that in there. Just like that. I'm going to give it a second here. And what that will do is it will pull in the actual article. I can then go back and delete this stuff here at the top. I don't need that link in there anymore. That messy URL, and sometimes, especially if you're sharing from like a New York Times article, these URLs can be super long and super messy. But we can get them out of here, and then we can put in here what we wanted to say. Looking for some great products for your business. Check these three out. I can also come in here and change what this stuff says. So if the title of my blog post, because a lot of times when we do blog posts, we try to think of the title in terms of the keyword phrases that we want to use, right? We talked about that in the last 2 weeks of these classes. But when you share something socially, right, maybe it doesn't make sense to use those keyword phrases. This might be where it makes sense to have a little bit more kind of flowery, fun descriptions, right? The things that engage real people and get them to click, not the things that engage the search engine and get them to rank us, right? So we can change what these things say. Obviously we can change our thumbnails in here, and those just get pulled out of our blog post itself. And then we can decide who we want to share this with. And he was asking earlier, you may not be able to share with more than one list, but you could share the same thing more than once and share it with different lists, right? And then I would just come in here and post this. For me, this is real estate agents, right? So I might come down here and do real estate people and post it just to them, right? Again, the likelihood that they're going to interact with that content is a heck of a lot higher than the likelihood that everybody on my friends list is going to interact with it. And so what that does is that builds affinity with just that group while not alienating the other people and not kind of tearing down affinity with other groups of people that I'm connected to. So the fact you can change these, I love this. And also being able to get rid of that ugly URL because you don't need it in there, right? Once Facebook pulls it in, you can get rid of that stuff as you update.